Hey guys, welcome to a special Record Store Day edition of the Vinyl Rundown. And I just got a couple of lovely LPs in the mail, and I'm going to show them to you and go over a little review of two records by Ahmad Jamal coming out this week for Black Friday Record Store Day. These are preview copies that were sent to me by the record label and Zev Feldman. Thank you very much, guys, for providing those. Total surprise, so thank you again. So, a couple historical things are going on here. Ahmad Jamal, great piano player, well known in the 60s and 70s. He is still alive and active today at age 92, and he did help consult on putting this release together. So this is the first set of releases by Zev Feldman, the jazz detective, because he goes around the world digging into archives and vaults and private collections and finding unreleased gems of music, working with the estates and musicians and their families to get authorized versions of these out and released. And we're hearing actually side one of the volume 2 live at the Penthouse 1965 right now. I put that in the background. It's very dynamic live recording, so sometimes we got loud drums, sometimes we have soft piano. Hopefully this doesn't get this video demonetized, but I wanted you to hear kind of the feel of it. This is my third best system. This is not a great system. This just happens to be the one in the record, the big record room. So that's the one you're hearing today. I have listened to this at length on my big system, my big Joseph audio speakers. Fantastic live sound. We'll get into that more, but I want to give you a little historical context. Ahmad Jamal piano trio, very popular in the 60s and 70s, and he has a unique style, and he was actually more popular with the public than critics at some point. He sold a lot of records, and his style of music is very accessible, let's say that. So if you're new to jazz, this is very accessible to you. There's a lot of jazz standards, some compositions of his own, some popular tunes, but great, well-rounded player who has a really unique style. It's a little bit staccato in some places. He very much relies on lines as opposed to chords. You'll hear a lot of chords, but he's not a lush player like Oscar Peterson, for example. He plays a lot of very recognizable, distinctive lines. But when people like Miles Davis say he's one of my biggest influences, if you listen to him carefully, you'll see how the influence to Miles Davis, what that's about. And a lot of people talk about Amal being able to use space in his music, being able to not play. Knowing when to play versus not play is an important part of musical language. Knowing when it's time to let the audience listen and absorb what you just said, and knowing when it's time to lay back and let other musicians take their turn, and knowing when it's just not time to fill up the record with a lot of notes. So that's kind of my 2-second interpretation of Ahmad Jamal's style. So let's get into these records in a little more detail. So this is a 2-record set of double records. I call it Volume 1, but it's not really called Volume 1. It's called Emerald City Nights Live at the Penthouse 63 to 64. And then a couple years later, Live at the Penthouse 65 to 66. So the Penthouse is a defunct club in Seattle. It's not around anymore, but it was around for, I think, 7 or 8 years in the 60s. The Penthouse was owned by a man named Charlie Puzo, and he is since deceased, but his son, Charlie Puzo Jr., hope I'm pronouncing that right, I've conversed with a little bit, tried to work at getting him on the channel. We'll do that someday. But his son is sort of in charge of the archive of all the great recordings that were made at the Penthouse. Now, you may have heard of the John Coltrane recording. That's kind of the most famous recording that's come out of the Penthouse. That was released about a year or two. That's the only sort of official live release of Love Supreme at the Penthouse in Seattle. That came out a couple years ago. So for a lot of newer jazz fans, that might be the first recording you have heard of at the Penthouse, but he hosted a lot of legendary players. So, Emerald City Nights, Emerald City referring to the beautiful city of Seattle, associated with the color green. Volume 1, as I call it, is the good green. Volume 2, more or less the same artwork, but it's blue. and you can buy them independently, obviously, but I think this is going to be a popular release for Record Store Day. I think it's limited to 3,000 copies each. Now, again, I mentioned that Zev Feldman is embarking on his own record label, which is called Jazz Detective. He has been called the Jazz Detective himself for going around and digging out these great recordings from the archives. So this is his first recording, and it's debuting on Record Store Day. And with everything he does, in addition to getting all the rights taken care of and the cooperation of the states, he also does beautiful packaging and interviews. So both of these records have their own inner booklet with beautiful photography, and can't really do justice to it on a little camera like this, but beautiful photographs, interviews. And one thing that he always does with his releases is he gets some really surprisingly interesting people to be interviewed. Oh, these are both mastered by Bernie Grundman, by the way. And we've got interviews with Ahmad himself, which is great. Ramsey Lewis, who just passed away in the last couple of years, who was very popular at sort of the same time Ahmad Jamal was. Both were very popular, sold a lot of records. Hiromi, who is a Japanese protege of Ahmad Jamal's. John Batiste. John Batiste, like, practically swept the Grammys last year in terms of both soul and soundtrack and jazz and even a classical recording. So John Batiste, there's an interview with John Batiste here talking about how he was influenced by Ahmad. Kenny Barron, piano player. Marshall Chess, beautiful artwork front and back. I have a thing about opening up my gate sleeves because it's going to ruin the plastic, but I'll open it someday. So I can't show you the inner gate sleeve. Each one has its own booklet. They are similar, but they're not the same. Some of the photographs and interviews are repeated, but some of them are unique to the Volume 1 or Volume 2. So check that out. In terms of sound quality, this sounds great for a live club. I mean, I really love live club ambience. You don't really hear a lot of audience noise. You do hear a little bit of applause at the beginning and end of some tracks. But for the most part, you don't hear live audience chit-chat or drinks clanking, which I don't mind, but if you do mind it, those aren't on here. I will say that I thought Volume 1, the bass was a little recessed compared to Volume 2. That's just the nature of a live recording. You got what you got, recorded 50 plus years ago. But overall, these are crystal clear sounds. Some of these archival records, the sound can be a little sketchy, but I think these sound really good. And pressings are really great. 180 gram vinyl. Let me show you what one of the records looks like. So it's a nice thick vinyl, very flat. And they're all in plastic sleeves, which is great. I really can't stand buying plastic reissues that are in paper sleeves. So this is a paper sleeve. Did I say paper? Plastic sleeve, nice and soft. 4 great discs of vinyl with Ahmad Jamal coming out this week on Record Store Day. And check it out, guys. Thanks for watching. Let me know if you have any comments. Talk to you soon.